What kind of accounting system are we doing? What's the documentation? What do they call that for job order costs? Is it called a job order cost sheet? And what goes on that sheet, the job order cost sheet? Whew. I see a lot of people sweating like they don't really know this. Would it be direct materials? Would that be an estimate or the actual or a hybrid? Would direct labor costs go on there? Would that be an estimated amount, actual amounts? For each job, you have a cost sheet? Boy, this doesn't seem like people are familiar with this at all. Job cost sheet keeps track of how much direct material is going into that job, whether you're building a custom desk or you're building a custom house. It's all going on that job cost sheet, all the direct materials. What else besides direct material costs is going on that job cost sheet?
You also got your direct labor too.
Your direct labor costs. You're taking the number of hours times the rate that the direct labor is getting paid, and you're determining the actual direct labor costs on the job, and you got the actual direct material costs on that job. What else goes on that cost sheet besides the actual direct materials and direct labor?
Overhead.
Overhead. Do we break the overhead down into fixed and variable with this?
I don't remember.
When I remember, we apply it, so we include.
We apply it.
Yeah,
We're using plywood.
we only use fixed manufacturing overhead when we're applying it to work in process. I think I can't remember. I gotta study up, Ed.
Geez, so we didn't really prepare for today's class, other than it just makes you think like, gosh, I got a lot to study because I can't remember this stuff. It isn't at the tip of my tongue. How does an old guy like me remember it? What's the secret?
40 years.
Repetition. Repetition, my dear lady, yes. So is it just fixed overhead? Or we're applying it using what? How do we apply it? What did they call that? POR. I abbreviate it with POR. What's that?
Predetermined overhead.
Predetermined overhead. Oh, and we had to determine the total overhead. It wasn't broken down into fixed and variable for job order costing, now was it? But there's two ways to close out. What are you going to close out? Remember, we had to close out. One way is closing it out to cost of goods sold only. The other one is to allocate it. What were we closing out?
The overhead account?
Yes, why? Because manufacturing overhead is a temporary account. What side is the debit side and what side is the credit side? What's the journal entry when you apply the overhead? Here, answer this question in this order. When you determine predetermined overhead rate, what's the formula? Oh, there's lots of formulas.
It's the estimated manufacturing overhead cost.
Okay, stop right there. I want to make sure I absorb the numerator, the estimated total manufacturing cost. Oh, manufacturing overhead cost. Oh, can't mix that up. It can't be all manufacturing costs. It's got to be the estimated total manufacturing overhead only. Because on the exam, I remember a lot of people picked that one, total estimated manufacturing cost. But manufacturing costs include what cost? And that's the box lit up. What is it?
Fixed and variable.
Oh, is it just fixed and variable? overhead.
Or is that
No,
direct
free
labor, direct
manufacturing
marketing,
costs.
and direct
Free
labor,
Manufacturing costs. What are they?
direct labor, direct marketing, and,
Direct marketing, that's a new one.
oh, sorry. Direct labor, direct material, and manufacturing overhead.
Oh, I always like to start with the material. I can see the material. There's the direct material. The direct laborers are taking the direct materials, the two direct costs. And then we have all other costs. And it's over my head. It's manufacturing overhead. Yes, it includes both fixed and variable. We didn't break it down yet. That was chapter 3, job order costing, right? Or was that chapter 2? So we had the prologue that had some basic stuff. And then we had, all the definitions. Manufacturing costs was in that chapter 1. Direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. It never changed from chapter 1 till through chapter 10 in the appendix. It always are 3 costs to manufacturing costs. 2 are direct materials, direct labor. You can actually see those costs and you can trace them easily. But the overhead items, you can't easily trace to products. That's why we have to apply it. So somebody mentioned you take the total estimated manufacturing overhead cost, but they didn't say what we divide it by. Vincent, what do we divide it by?
The estimated allocation base, which could be like direct labor hours or machine hours.
Yes, or it could be direct labor costs, right? Yes, and then that gives you your predetermined overhead rate. So how do we put overhead into the process for job order costing? What gets debited, what gets credited? Because I remember journal entries. Doesn't journal entries come to mind here in this job order costing type problem?
So actual overhead is debited.
To where? It's just debited?
Oh,
Just open up the journal and you put it in as a debit anywhere? Or does it go to an actual account?
yeah, it goes to work in process.
Goes into work in process. So you're saying the amount you're applying goes into work in process for the manufacturing overhead. And how about direct material costs and direct labor costs? Where does that go? We might run out of time before we get to all seven problems because people aren't remembering. Nobody remembers. Well, there's what you gotta look up, I guess.
Your materials first go towards your raw materials purchases inventory. When you purchase
So when you purchase it, it goes to the raw materials inventory. So the journal entry would be, what do you debit, what do you credit?
debit cash, or
You debit cash? So when you purchase, here's material and here's your cash, that goes with it. So you're gonna,
credit whatever you use to pay for it, and then you want to debit the amount of material that you purchased, and then as that flows through.
so you're gonna debit direct materials inventory,
Yep.
or is it just called raw materials inventory because they just have one inventory account? You know,
Right.
maybe a warehouse of direct materials and indirect materials, right?
Yes, sir.
And you credit cash if you paid cash for it. But if they said they bought it on account, what would you credit?
You'd credit your accounts payable.
Yes, it's funny how accounting 255 slips in here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, debits and credits. Yes. But that doesn't get it into production. That just gets it into the warehouse. How do we get it into production?
So once you start, once you have documented which purchases, then obviously it might not be the same amount as what you purchased, but whatever you use in production then gets goes through into work in process inventory accounts.
Okay, so do you use like an applied amount of direct materials like you did overhead?
So I believe with job order, well, it's different but depending on the type of costing that you do. The flows are different, I believe. So I want to say for job order costing, what we did was we actually took the actual, we documented it, and then what we would do is we would actually apply to find out whether it was over applied or under applied. So when we applied, we would take our predetermined overhead rate, multiply by our
Allocation base?
right, and then that would see, because it's easy to do it that way so that you're not.
Well, what would you
Never
debit and credit? What would you debit and credit when you're applying the overhead? Which accounts are involved here?
Yeah, so when you transfer materials to work in
Oh,
process.
are we talking about materials now? I thought we were talking about what we applied in overhead.
So
Give me either one journal entry, because nobody else seems to have a clue.
So are you talking about for when we document manufacturing overhead?
Yeah. How do we record the manufacturing overhead when we apply it?
Oh yeah, so when we apply it, we credit it.
What do we debit? What do we credit?
Yeah, so we credit.
I want to know what you debit.
Debit. Hold on, I'll know it.
I know it. You'll know it by game day, but right now, today, you're just being all over yourself, aren't you?
Would it be cost of goods sold that you debit?
Cost of goods sold, that's an expense. We expensing it off right away. We didn't even manufacture it yet. We just took it right from raw materials inventory and threw it right into cost of goods sold.
Well,
that
when
how
you
we
do
do that,
from raw
Vincent?
materials, you would debit direct materials and direct labor on the actual and work in process.
Wait. What are you debiting for direct materials and direct labor?
Work in process
Work
inventory.
in process. Oh, so it comes out of the raw materials inventory and we put it into production. When we start working on it, it's called work in process. And that's the account. That's an inventory account. There's a total of 3 inventory accounts, right? A minimum. What are the 3 inventory accounts?
Raw materials, work
Raw
in
materials
process,
inventory. What
work
else?
in process
Work in
inventory,
process inventory
manufacturing overhead,
and manufacturing
or
overhead
and
inventory
finished goods inventory.
and finished goods. So now you tell me there's 4? Vanessa, can you pipe in here? I see your square is lit.
It
See,
doesn't
it's
go
lit
into
up.
overhead. It doesn't go into marketing overhead.
It
It's
doesn't
just
go
raw
into
materials,
marketing
WIP,
overhead.
and
So tell me
finished
the
goods.
3 inventory accounts. There's 3 inventory accounts. Vanessa, clear it up. Clear it up.
raw materials, work in process, and finished goods.
Those are the 3. That's right. And how do we do the journal entry when we're applying the manufacturing overhead? Which account is debited, which account is credited?
So it gets, so your manufacturing overhead gets credited and your
So she's
debit
crediting
goes to,
manufacturing overhead.
and your debit goes to cost of goods sold.
All right, Cherie, that's wrong. Tell her what it is now. Cherie, are you there? Okay, so how do we do the journal entry when we apply overhead into production? What gets debited, what gets credited? We would take it out of the raw materials, yes. Well, how do we debit or credit raw materials inventory? Okay, say that again. Well, usually we start with the debit. We're going to debit work in process, and then we're going to indent and credit raw materials. And that's correct for direct materials. That goes in at actual, doesn't it? Cherie, how about direct labor? What are you going to do? What are you going to debit? What are you going to credit? Because you don't have a direct labor inventory account, do you? So what do we debit? What do we credit? So you want to debit or credit manufacturing overhead account? Is direct materials and direct labor, are they considered manufacturing overhead? Do they go to the manufacturing overhead account? I didn't think so, but you were kind of making the case that maybe it should be.
Wouldn't it be
You're gonna
indirect
you're
materials
gonna have
and
to rewrite
indirect
a book.
labor?
Say that again, Vincent. You might be onto something.
Wouldn't it be the indirect materials and indirect labor that you debit in manufacturing overhead at the
Would
actual?
that be the applied or the actual?
No, it would be the applied or actual, I mean, sorry,
Applied actual.
actual.
Actual. All right. That would be a good wrong answer. Applied actual. So if we're debiting manufacturing overhead for the actual manufacturing overhead, how are we applying the overhead, Vincent?
You would apply it on the right side of the T account.
Manufacturing overhead?
Yes.
And what are you going to debit?
Then you debit. If you have like a under
If you're
applied,
applying the overhead, you're going to debit which account?
Work in process.
Boy, that's pretty good. Vincent, he's right. We're going to debit work in process for actual direct material and actual direct labor. But we're going to debit work in process for the applied manufacturing overhead. Can you see me writing it down in a T account and putting the words actual direct materials, actual direct labor, but the applied manufacturing overhead, which I would just put down MO, MO? Did I do that? I did. So we debit our work in process for the applied manufacturing overhead, and we credit manufacturing overhead for the applied. The actual manufacturing overhead gets debited to manufacturing overhead, and we credit the necessary account. If we use indirect labor, we'd be crediting the raw materials inventory account. If we had indirect labor, we would be debiting manufacturing overhead and crediting salaries and wages payable, wouldn't we? If we had depreciation on the equipment that's used in the production, we would show a debit to manufacturing overhead for the depreciation expense. We don't call it depreciation expense because we're not debiting depreciation expense. Has to do with the factory. We're going to debit manufacturing overhead, but we'll credit accumulated depreciation, won't we? Wow, we got a lot to review with that job order costing. We didn't even get out of production yet. When we're done producing the product, then where does it go? Justin, you seem like you would know.
After it's done with work in progress, it gets
Is
shifted
it
over
work in progress or process?
or
That
process.
would be a great wrong answer.
After a work in process, it goes into finished goods.
Yes, once it's completed and the product is done being worked on, it's no longer in work in process, it's a finished product. So we debit finished goods inventory, we credit work in process inventory. When we're building the product, it's in an inventory account called work in process inventory. All right, very good. Now, what's the difference in the manufacturing overhead account? What's the difference called between the debits and credits in the manufacturing overhead account?
Either over applied or under applied overhead.
Okay, the debit side represents what again?
Actual,
And the credit side?
applied.
So when you add both sides up, are they supposed to equal?
If they do, that's good, I guess.
But how often does that happen?
Probably doesn't happen very often because you probably have to estimate that.
That might happen in your dreams.
Yeah,
Generally, there's going to be a difference, right? If the credit side's larger than the debit side, what's that called?
that's over applied.
Oh, we put more into overhead, we applied more than what the actual was. So how do we resolve that issue when the credit's larger than the debit? What's the adjustment if we're just adjusting it to cost of goods sold?
If that is the case, I believe what we do.
So let's put some numbers to it to make it simple.
Yeah.
Let's say the debit side is $1,000. The credit side is $1,200. Did we under or over apply?
Over applied by $200.
So how do we take care of that difference between debits and credits, which you're calling is over apply? What do we need to do to zero out the manufacturing overhead account since it's a temporary account?
Is this when you would debit manufacturing overhead for
You're
that,
right. By how much would you debit manufacturing overhead?
the $200?
That's correct. And
And
then
then-
are you done or do you have to show a credit?
You have to show a credit to cost of goods sold.
See, you got it right on, Vincent. Vincent, you bailed out Tyler. He's been having a rough day today.
I got him, man. I
He
got him.
appreciates it. He appreciates it. So I can see the sweat dripping coming out of his hat. It's been a tough day. It's all right. That's what
You can
makes
also do
What?
the. You can also close proportionally to the work in process, finished goods, and cost of goods sold.
so
that
what
was
what are the three accounts that you're going to allocate it to again?
Work in process, finished goods, and cost of goods sold.
You're absolutely right. How do you proportion it? How do you figure
Yeah.
out the percentage? Do you know?
Yeah, so you take your total applied overhead.
No, you take the total balance, the ending balance in work in process, the ending balance in finished goods and cost of goods sold. You add all three up. That gives you the total. Then you take each component over the total. That gives you the percentage. That's
Shoot,
how you prorate it.
easy enough.
That's how you prorate it, for heaven's sakes. What's an old man like me at 67 still teaching this stuff? Why? Tell me, WH, why I
Because you're
do
good
it?
at it.
Or do I just like to harass students? That's what I'm going to do in retirement. My job is just to harass my students. Is that what I'm doing? Or am I trying to get you to think under pressure? I'm kind of doing that. And that's what I do with wrestlers. Hey, we got a big meet coming up. I'm going to put them in situations that we're going to see from this team. They use certain techniques and we're going to fall in these different positions. I'm going to show them how do we get out of it, how we can score from that, how to defend from there. And I'm going to put them in it and we're going to drill it over and over until they do it automatically. Am I doing it because I like to see them like work hard? Is that why I'm doing it? Or I'm trying to get them so they can be victorious, so they can have their hand raised after the match? What am I trying to get you guys to do right now? Trying to get you to think. You're trying to recall all that information that you learned. It's tough because you really didn't review, right? You came to today's practice not really prepared. So now I get to hammer you if you're not ready, and I will. And do I take pleasure in it? Well, a little bit. And it's all in fun, but it's also to spark your mind like, crap, I better get on this stuff. There's a lot here I need to review. You know, you can't say, well, I did pretty good on the past exams. I'm going to do all right on this one. No, you got to put in the time. There's nothing you can really do to shortcut the process of being successful. Hard work and sticking at it, persevering through the whole semester. I had a guy that was sitting pretty good, 72% and accounting 255. He was doing a pretty good job. And then after chapter 9, he quit doing the summaries. Oh, he didn't think he needed to do the summaries. What kind of benefit? I don't have to take quizzes for a grade. But guess what? Those quiz questions are similar on the exam. I told him you should do them as if you're taking a quiz, but no pressure. You don't have to worry about the grade, but you got to learn the material. He quit doing the homework. He didn't do chapter 13 homework, the one that we had a problem on all the ratios that we learned all semester. And right now, if I gave you that ratio problem, you probably couldn't get half of them, right? Because you kind of need to review unless you've been doing this for like 38 years, and then it comes automatically. I can just spit it out at you, right? And that's what happens when you become an expert in an area. You put in your 10,000 hours and they say you're an expert. You spent 10,000 hours into just about anything. So, wow. Anyways, so how many problems did we identify? We only have like another 11 minutes to identify the rest. We identified a possible cash budget, a problem on variances, a job order type problem. And if I recall, didn't we have to do journal entries? Oh, we did, didn't we, for job order costing? How about process costing? Process costing. That's for homogeneous products. One product looks like the next, sort of like this. Can you see that? Oh yeah, paperclip. That's process costing. We have different departments, right? What are some of the key things that we have to know about work in process?
There's
The
multiple
process.
work in process accounts.
Yes, that's true. But all the journal entries are the same. The only difference is we have multiple work in process accounts. Do we have direct materials coming in to each work in process account? We can. This department's taking the metal and bending it to the proper proportion, right? And then it goes to the next department and they put a coating over this so it doesn't rust or whatever. Maybe it has a little slight plastic coating, make it easier, so the direct materials can go into each work in process department along with direct labor could be there, and you could have overhead, and the overhead could be applied for that department. Maybe it's direct labor hours, but the other department might be machine hours, could be direct labor cost, right? So you can have multiple predetermined overhead rates depending on which work in process department we're using.
You have to find the equivalent units of production too.
Oh, equivalent units. How the heck do you do that?
You use the weighted average method, I believe.
Oh, you don't want to do first in, first out?
Did we learn that one this year, or do we only focus on that?
We only focused on one. When I was teaching at the Big U at Grand Canyon University, my students had to know both methods. I had a little bit better group of students because they had to have a minimum of a 3.0 if they're transferring in from anywhere, or they had to have an ACT test score of a 22 or higher. So that eliminated those students that, got a high school degrees by getting straight D's, which you can do that, because my wife taught high school and she'd be surprised when somebody, oh, I got a D, I passed. They were excited. They were shooting for the D and they got it. So if you shoot low, you're not going to get the A, that's for sure. All right. So let's review how many that we already recollected. Cash budget could be on there, the variance problem, job order costing, process costing with equivalent units. That's only 4 of the 7. Oh, contribution margin type income statement and absorption costing or variable costing. Is that going to be on there too? Oh, there's one more then, isn't there? Is that 5 or 6 that I mentioned? Gosh, what other problems were on there? Vanessa, can you remember?
No, I
Cherie,
have
maybe
cash
Cherie,
budget journal entries.
journal entries? Journal entries on what? We mentioned journal entries with job order costing. Do we have other journal entry type problem?
No, I think that's the only one.
What was that? Variance analysis. Did we mention that already?
No.
No, we didn't. I thought that's what direct materials, direct labor, variable manufacturing overhead and fixed manufacturing overhead variance was all about. And then we talked about total spending variance, except one exception, Vanessa. Once the one time that we don't show a total spending variance. Is it for fixed manufacturing overhead, variable manufacturing overhead, direct materials, direct labor?
Direct material.
Yes. And when would we not show a total spending variance for direct materials? Then what happens?
When we don't use all the material.
So we buy more than what we put into production.
Correct.
Oh, that reminds me of what happens when you produce more than you sell. What happens when inventory levels increase or decrease? What's that reference to? Is that variable costing compared to absorption costing? Remember that? And then wasn't there a schedule or something that we had to do one time? Was that one of our problems? What was that called? So there's a schedule of cost of goods sold, which we did in financial accounting, right? And then what's the one that we did here in managerial accounting? What was that schedule called? Sheree, I think you said it, kind of. What did you say it was again? Oh, isn't it called the schedule of cost of goods manufactured? And what goes on a schedule of cost of goods manufactured? Justin, looks like you're thinking like you know it. What is it?
The direct material costs.
Direct material costs go on there. What's it called again? Schedule of cost of, no,
Goods
wait, schedule of cost of goods manufactured? What are the free freaking costs for manufacturing costs? Would they go on there?
Direct materials, direct labors, and then manufacturing overhead.
Would they go in at applied amounts or actual amounts?
Should be actual amounts.
Actual amounts for all three?
Trying to remember.
I know it. It's in the memory there somewhere. You're gonna have to maybe look in that chapter.
Manufacturing overhead would be applied, right?
Yes, you're right, Vincent. You're really showing your knowledge. Well, do you have Google right in front of you right there? Is that how you
No.
do it?
I have
Is
all
it
my
in your-
notes.
It's your notes or it's in the textbook?
In my notes.
Gosh, you take good notes.
I try to.
I remember I said all that stuff, didn't I? I don't try to waste my time. And am I saying kind of the same things that I said throughout the semester?
Mhm.
Yes, because they must have been important or I wouldn't say it. Yes. Is that all 7 problems now? Do we got them down? Because we only have 3 minutes left. Let's review them. Who could tell me? Let's name them again. Can you name
Cash
one
budget.
by
Cash budget,
cash budget? He gets the easy one. All right.
variance
What's another one?
analysis,
Variance analysis, easy, because that was from the last exam. That was less than 7 days ago, wasn't it?
yes, it was. Determining equivalent units.
Determining equivalent units, is that all you do? And that, what kind of problem requires you to determine equivalent units? Is that the only thing you do, or is there a lot more to do than just determining equivalent units?
There's a lot more than that.
That's just part of it. That's just getting it started in part 1, determining equivalent units, right?
Yes.
And then you got to figure out which cost, and then you got to take the equivalent units, divide it into costs. Isn't it like, conversion cost, indirect material cost? What are conversion costs? What's the definition of conversion cost?
The conversion cost, that's how many will be.
No, I want to know the definition. That's chapter 1. Chapter 1. Conversion costs are. And can you tell me prime cost?
It's your
Can you
direct.
tell me prime cost, conversion cost?
Oh, goodness.
Deshante has good notes. Deshante, what do you have for conversion
Yeah.
cost?
I don't know.
Vincent, you take good notes. What do you have for?
It's What I have, it says it's the sum of the direct labor and manufacturing overhead.
Oh, it's the two costs. You take direct material. So I picture this. Here's direct material. And then this guy, the direct labor is working on it. And then we have some like overhead, like lighting would be overhead, right? And that would convert this into the finished product. What's prime cost? Conan, prime cost. It's a question mark in your mind.
The
Right.
prime costs are direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead, right?
No, those are the three manufacturing costs. Clarissa, straighten them out. Only two of the three are considered prime costs, Clarissa.
Direct material and direct labor.
Yes, the ones that are direct cost are called prime costs. So what's in both prime costs and conversion costs? That's always a good multiple choice question. You got to know the definition of both, don't you?
Direct labor.
Direct labor's in both, isn't it? It's in conversion costs and it's in prime costs. Oh, but we're not having the multiple choice part of the exam till next week, right? Is that a week from today? We're doing the problems. So let's see how many we've named. We've named the variance problem, cash budget problem, the equivalent unit, determining equivalent units. Is that what you're going to call that problem? Tyler? It's more than, that's only one part.
Unit costing.
No, it's called process costing. Process costing problem. Jeepers, creepers.
Hey, this is good for me. This is
It's a wake-up call, buddy.
makes
It's
you look
like I'm
at.
calling you at 4 a.m. Here's your wake-up call.
We're like 3:30 in the morning.
Well, I was up at 12:30 this morning. I worked till 4:30 and then I went back to bed. Yeah,
Hey, come on, you don't need naps, Ed. What are you doing?
I need naps. At my age, you got to have naps. You're just watching TV, you start to take a nap. You sit in the car, you start taking naps. That's just what old people do. That's kind of fun. You get to do that and get to pee all over yourself. That's what you get to do. But you also get to fart a lot too. You know, you just don't worry about it anymore. Who cares what people think? And you know what I wear? I wear Crocs with socks too today. Oh yeah. Went to a seminar. Couldn't find my shoes. We just put on the Crocs and I headed that way. You think they welcomed me? Sure they did. They wanted my business. Yeah. And I wear a fanny pack. And I just bought one of those holders of my phone that I could put on my belt. So now I'm really looking cool.
You got some New Balances too there.
New Balance.
Yep, you like those shoes, Ed?
No, he
I
has the
buy
Monarchs.
ASIC. I buy ASIC shoes.
You have the Monarchs, huh, Ed?
Yeah, the Nike Monarch.
That's old school. All right. Did we name all 7 or are we still struggling? I better just let you go and study. You'll figure it out, right? When you start reviewing. There's a schedule on there. Cherie got that one.
Do you have, is it the schedule
Yeah.
of cost of goods sold and manufactured or just manufactured?
Oh, I thought we had both of them on there. Right? You better
Okay,
check the homework.
I
problem.
have both of them. I'm just making sure.
Yeah, and then I could even throw in an income statement then once.
Yep, I have that too.
So you know how to do an income statement, right? But what if I ask you to do a absorption costing income statement versus a contribution margin type income statement? Which one works for the variable costing? Variable cost. It's a contribution format.
Contribution format.
Absorption costing, we use traditional for sales minus, our
Expensive.
variable our cost of goods sold gives us gross margin, less selling administrative expenses. And then you got some that are fixed, some that are variable. You got to split it out. Yeah. Well, I don't want it. I'm stealing your time. That I'm taking away from you. So I better let you go because you're
Anybody else not hear him?
Okay, I thought that was just me.
I see everybody's face going, is he in there? Did it go somewhere? That was great. I wish I would have recorded that.
I'm dead.
Well, it looks like he left us.
Yeah, he's gone. Oh no, he's back. I see his name in here. Where'd he go?
No, he's still here. He's playing
Oh,
tricks. Tyler, you're the host now.
Oh no.
Tyler.
What?
What's on the exam? You're the host.
I tell you what. Gonna be
Come
every problem on the homework's on the exam. That's
Shit.
what I'll say.
That's what I've been looking at for real, dude.
That's what I study. I'll just start.
Fuck.
Right.